G'day, Outback Cat here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to change your brake pads and your disc rotors on a 2012 N70 Hilux. Now this specific car has more hits than Elvis Presley, but that's alright, she'll be right. As you can see, I'm coming in here hot with my trolley jack. I'm going to mount it underneath the lower control arm at the closest point to the tyre, just to mitigate any potential risk of uncontrolled movements as I take the weight off the tyre. I'm then going to go in with a jack stand and I'm going to mount that under the chassis rail in case of any other potential uncontrolled movements, and that you're always going to be as safe as possible. Now, before I went in here with the Ugga Dugga, I did use a breaker bar on my socket just to crack those wheel studs, just so I could use the Ugga Dugga to just quickly undo them in one hit. If you don't do that, you are likely to strip bolts. I'm the kind of person that does, so I will take precautions. Rightio, rip that tyre off, wheel it out of the road, turn your car on, make sure it's in neutral, and turn your steering wheel to the right. Just so we've got as much wiggle room as possible, because we will be needing that space, as we will have to use a breaker bar at some point in here. So this first bolt you see me undoing now, I believe it's a 12mm socket, so just chuck that on your breaker bar, give it a crack. Once you've got that loosened, go in there with your ratchet and just chuck your 12mm socket on that. It's the bolt with a bit of a peg above it. That just holds that bit of a show in place there. And once you've done that, we're going to come down to these two little bolts down here. I believe they're a 17mm. So grab your 17mm socket, chuck it on your breaker bar and give them a bit of a crack. Now these two bolts here hold your brake caliper onto your stub axle, and they're quite important. So they're going to be fairly tight. And that's something just to keep in mind when we do back up later, that it's quite important to have them fairly nipped up. Then swap your socket over to your ratchet and loosen them up the rest of the way. As you can see, I'm a measure once, cut twice kind of gal. So I could have just done my breaker bar on both bolts straight off the bat and then gone in with the ratchet, but I like to do things the hard way. Now in this video, I leave those two 17mm bowls in place. I just undo them, loosen them up, but I want them to kind of hold that caliper in place for the time being. Now your next step is going to try to remove this hairpin clip. You're going to kind of like push the little nub on the left-hand side in and drag it out at the same time. You'll work it out. You can use needle nose pliers. I've just gone in and used my little fingies, but use whatever you need to get it out. You'll work it out. That little hairpin clip sort of thing, they hold these little retaining pins in, top and bottom. They go through the caliper, but they also go through your brake pads at the same time. So that kind of holds everything in. So what you're going to use is either, I've got some long nose pliers, I've also got a screwdriver, and I'm just jimmying them out. You can also wiggle the brake caliper as you do this, just to loosen it up a bit better. Once your pin's out, then you're going to pick up a flat blade screwdriver, and you're going to jimmy these brake pads up against your rotor. You can't really do too much damage, but what the aim is you can see those little things on the side there, your pistons, and they hold your brake pads onto your rotor with hydraulic pressure and all that kind of stuff. So what we need to do is we need to be able to jimmy them out enough so that those pistons, those round things, gets pushed back in. Then we can take our brake pad out. So that was the old one coming out, and this is the new one going in. It's not going in full stop, fair dinkum for now. It's just going to go in there so that I know I've got enough room, and then I'm going to wiggle the other side and do that again with the piston. The reason why we put the new pads in there and we push those pistons over is because if we don't put the pad in there, as we lever the other side, those pistons could pop back out. And if that happens, it's a bit of a show. You'll have brake fluid everywhere and you'll absolutely need to go get new brake caliper kits. And it's just a bit of a stuff round that you can quite easily avoid. Now, as you can see here, because I'm levering it the wrong way, it's going to take twice as long. If I just levered it away from me, I'd get a better friction point and pressure point on that actual piston itself as I push it, and it would take half the time. But hey, I'm not a mechanic and we're all learning and we're all just doing our best. So as long as you're having a go, that's all that matters. Now you saw how I put that other new one in there as well. Yep, checked out, all fitted in there nicely. Then I'm going to take them out. Now I'm going to take these two 17mm bolts out. I'm just going to use my hands just because I know they're loose enough. Once they're out of the road, you're going to pull the brake caliper off the disc rotor and you're just going to set it down there nicely. Can't do any damage and it'll support its own weight. Following this, you're going to need an 8mm by 1.25mm threaded bolt just to push the disc off the hub. You will need a socket and just to put a bit of pressure on it. Once you've done that, unscrew it and your disc rotor is going to pop straight off. Now at this point, half your battle's already been won. All you're doing now is everything in reverse. You're grabbing your new rotor, you're chucking it on, you're giving it a bit of a tap just so it's snug up against the hub. I didn't tap it hard enough just because I'm scared I was going to bloody reroute my threads on my wheel studs there. But look, it doesn't matter if it's moving around a bit because as you put those bolts back in, you're going to tighten it all up anyway and your wheel nuts are going to do half the job. But this next bit can be a little bit tricky just because everything's back to front and you can't really see where those holes are. But you're going to get those 17mm bolts and you're just going to line them back up and you're going to try to screw them in. You might have to give that brake caliper a bit of a wiggle around just to realign those holes and get those 17mm bolts in. Now what we're doing up here, we've got that 12mm bolt and we're going to put that little peg in that hole. Once it's in, then we're going to try to put that bolt in and line it up. Once it's lined up, we're going to use our 12mm socket again, just ratcheting him back in, nice and tight. It's a little bolt, so don't go hell for leather. These ones down here, you'll definitely give a bit of a torque up because that's holding the show together. But until you've got those brake pads in, just nip them up for now because you'll probably want a bit of wiggle room once you do put those pads in. Grab your new set of brake pads, check the wear, check how much bloody money you've saved by going down to the metal. Nah, in all honesty, don't be a dickhead. Make sure you do them as you need to. Be safe for yourself and everyone else. Now you'll notice on your brand new brake pads that there will be these little shims, little thin metal plates that go on the outside of the actual brake pad itself. And the ones that came with the pads, I'm going to chuck them off as you see here. And I'm going to put the old stock Toyota shims back on. And that's because we only run genuine Toyota parts. It's Toyota shims that we've put back on. They've got two layers. So one is an anti-squeal shim and that goes closest to the piston. And the other one is a heat-proof shim and that's got these fluted slits in them and that goes closest to the pad. So that kind of makes a bit of a buffer against heat. Now, if you take them off and jumble them up, you can't really stuff them up too bad. Just remember that the one that's the anti-squeal, it goes closest to the two pistons there. So what you're going to have on your actual shim itself is they're called witness marks. So it shows where the wear and tear has been rubbing on it. So it's a good indicator of where it actually sits. So once you've got those new brake pads back in, I've already done it, but you're going to put those retaining pins back through the caliper. They line up through the new brake pads. And then you're going to line up those hairpin holes in those retaining pins for that clip to go in. Remember, you push it through the middle and it sits in that little groove there. Then just double check all your bolts. Also, this little metal thing indicates when your brake pads are getting low. So they'll start squealing because they'll start butting up against the disc rotor itself, letting you know that your brake pads are running out. Here, I'm just starting up the car. Once it's started, I'm going to pump the brakes. Because those pistons that I pulled apart, they need to butt up against the brake pad again and fill up with brake fluid. While the car was on, I straightened up my steering wheel just to make sure that my tyres were going forward, just so it's easier just chucking that tyre back on. And as the old saying goes, it's more enjoyable to get off than get on. So this is the part I always bloody struggle with. Anyway, so thankfully my dad and my neighbour were having a yarn out the front, so they just came over and just gave me a bit of support, just chucking that wheel back up. I find these new bead locks a bit tricky to put the tyre back on just because of the way the wheel studs sit in there. It's not quite right. And but once it's up there, I just grab one wheel nut. I use the extension piece specifically for these wheel nuts. I just pop them in there and then I just do them up with that actual piece in my hand. Once you've got one on there, you could walk away and make a cup of tea and come back. You're fine. Just make sure you put all the others on, obviously. Once they're on and I've screwed them up with the extension piece by hand, I then go and chuck that extension piece onto my socket and my ratchet here, and I'll just do them all up. You can drop the tyre down or use something to wedge it up underneath to stop the tyre spinning. I've just got my feet here because I'm just doing them tight enough so then when I drop the jack, then I'll re-torque them back up. Just make sure they're pretty fairly tight before you lower it back down. You don't want anything to be misaligned. Take your jack stand out first, then wind down your trolley jack. We've all done it the other way around, so don't you worry. Give your wheel nuts one last hit with the breaker bar. Make sure you're happy. Then jump in your car and take it for a spin around the block. We're doing this because we need the brake pads to settle in. So take it very, very easy on your brakes for the first few kilometres. Last step is to give yourself a pat on the back and be proud of what you've just achieved. It's not easy to be brave at being bad at something for the first time again. Woohoo! If you like this video or found it helpful, make sure you give it a like and subscribe. If there's any things you thought I could have done better, drop a comment below and let me know.